Everyone in the office liked Emma. They always smiled when they talked about her. "Emma helped me finish my report," Jason said one morning. "She even stayed after work last week," Lisa added. I only smiled and said nothing. I did not understand them. To me, Emma was the coldest person in the office. She came to work on time every day. She sat at her desk and started working right away. She did not join our morning chats. She did not laugh at funny stories. She only spoke when she had something important to say. At lunch, she always ate alone. After work, she packed her bag and left quickly. She never stayed for dinner with the team. She never joined birthday parties. She never asked anyone about their weekend. Because of these small things, I made up my mind. I believed she did not like people. One Friday afternoon, our manager asked us to work together on a new project. "Emma and Mia, you will be partners," he said. I looked up in surprise. Emma looked calm. She simply nodded and said, "Okay." I wanted to complain, but I did not. After the meeting, I walked to her desk. "Hi," I said. "When should we start?" She looked at her computer for a second. "Tomorrow morning is fine." "Can we talk about the plan now?" "I still have something to finish," she answered. "Tomorrow will be better." Then she looked back at her screen. That was all. No smile, no small talk, no friendly question. I walked away and felt annoyed. When I returned to my desk, Lisa looked at me. "So, how was it?" I shook my head. "See? She doesn't even want to have a normal conversation." Lisa frowned. "I don't think that's true." "Really?" I laughed. "She acts like everyone is wasting her time." Lisa did not answer. She only looked at Emma for a moment. Later that day, I saw something strange. The office was noisy because everyone was getting ready to leave for the weekend. People laughed. Someone played music. 2 co-workers talked about their travel plans. Emma quietly closed her laptop. She picked up her bag. Then she looked at her phone. For just 1 second, I saw a different expression on her face. She looked worried. Very worried. But the feeling disappeared almost at once. She walked out of the office without saying goodbye. I watched her leave. "She is always in a hurry," I said. No one answered me. At that moment, I believed I already knew what kind of person Emma was. Cold, quiet, proud, someone who did not care about anyone else. I had no idea that one small moment would soon destroy every opinion I had about her. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Emma was already there. She sat at her desk with a cup of coffee. Her eyes stayed on her computer screen. She looked tired, but she still greeted me with a small nod. "Good morning," I said. "Morning," she replied. That was our whole conversation. We spent the day working on our project. To my surprise, Emma was very organized. She explained every task clearly. She answered all my questions with patience. She never sounded rude. Still, she did not talk about anything outside of work. When lunchtime came, I asked, "Would you like to eat together?" She smiled politely. "Thank you, but I'll pass." She picked up a small lunchbox and walked to the quiet corner near the window. I watched her leave. "See," I whispered to myself, "she still wants to be alone." The day passed quickly. Dark clouds filled the sky outside. Around 6 o'clock, the rain started. Within minutes, it became a heavy storm. The sound of the rain covered everything. People looked out the windows. "I'll wait a little longer," Jason said. "I brought an umbrella." Lisa smiled. One by one, everyone left. I stayed behind because I thought the rain would stop soon. An hour later, it was still raining. I walked outside and checked my phone. Only 1%. Before I could call a taxi, the screen went black. No. I pressed the power button again. Nothing. My phone was dead. I looked around. The street was almost empty. The buses had stopped running because of an accident nearby. Even the taxi stand looked empty. I sighed. Great, just great. The rain became even heavier. Cold wind blew across the street. My shoes were already wet. I stood under the small roof outside the office building and wondered what to do. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Your phone died. I turned around. Emma stood there with a black umbrella. She had already changed into a simple blue jacket. Her hair was slightly wet from the rain. I felt embarrassed. Yeah, I admitted. And I think I missed the last bus. She looked at the dark street for a moment. Then she stepped closer and held the umbrella over both of us. You shouldn't stand here in the rain, she said softly. It's okay. I'll figure something out. She shook her head. No, come with me. I blinked. What? I'll help you get home. I did not know what to say. The woman I believed was cold had stopped, turned around, and come back for me. And somehow that small act felt warmer than all the friendly words I had heard from other people. For a few seconds, I simply stood there. The rain kept falling. Cars passed by with their lights shining through the dark street. Emma looked at me. Come on, she said with a gentle smile. You'll catch a cold. I walked beside her under the umbrella. Neither of us spoke very much. The silence was not awkward. It felt calm. After a few minutes, we reached the main road. Emma took out her phone and opened a taxi app. There are only a few drivers tonight, she said. We may have to wait. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to trouble you. You didn't. She said those two words so naturally that I almost forgot to answer. Soon, a taxi arrived. I reached into my bag for my wallet. Before I could take it out, Emma had already paid the driver through her phone. What are you doing? I asked. You can buy me a coffee on Monday, she said. I can't let you pay. It's fine. She smiled again. This time the smile reached her eyes. It was small, but it was real. I looked at her with surprise. This was not the woman I thought I knew. As the taxi drove away, I looked back through the window. Emma was still standing in the rain. She gave me a small wave. Then she turned around and walked toward the subway station. On Monday morning, I arrived early with 2 cups of coffee. Emma was already working. I placed 1 cup on her desk. For you, I said. She looked up. You remembered. Of course. She thanked me quietly and took a small sip. After a short silence, I finally asked the question that had been in my mind all weekend. Can I ask you something? She nodded. Why did you help me that night? She looked surprised. Then she gave a little laugh. Because you needed help. That's all? She nodded again. I hope someone would do the same for me. Her answer was so simple. No big speech, no proud smile, just one honest sentence. Before I could say anything else, our manager walked over. He placed some files on Emma's desk. Thank you for finishing the report last night, he said. I know you had another long weekend. Emma smiled politely. It was nothing. Our manager looked at me. You know, Emma has been carrying a heavy load for a long time. Emma lowered her eyes. It's okay, she said softly. He shook his head. No, she never tells anyone. Then he turned back to me. Every evening after work, Emma goes to the hospital. I froze. The hospital? He nodded. Her mother has been sick for 3 years. Emma takes care of her every day. After that, she goes home, cooks dinner, and prepares everything for the next morning. I could not believe what I was hearing. Suddenly, every memory became different. She did not leave work early because she disliked us. She hurried away because someone was waiting for her. She did not eat lunch alone because she was proud. She was simply tired. She did not smile often because life had given her very little time to rest. At that moment, I realized something painful. Emma had never changed. The only thing that changed was the way I finally saw her. After that day, I could not stop thinking about Emma. I felt embarrassed. For weeks I had judged her without knowing anything about her life. I remembered every time I called her cold, every time I thought she was unfriendly. Now those memories made me uncomfortable. The next morning I arrived at the office with a different attitude. Instead of waiting for Emma to speak first, I walked to her desk. "Good morning." She looked up and smiled. "Good morning." The smile was still small, but this time I noticed something I had missed before. Her smile was warm. It was just quiet. As the days passed, I began to notice many little things. One afternoon, the cleaning lady dropped a box of paper on the floor. The papers flew everywhere. Most of us looked over for a second. Then we went back to work. Emma stood up immediately. "I'll help," she said. She knelt on the floor and picked up every piece of paper. The cleaning lady thanked her again and again. Emma only smiled. It wasn't a big deal. Another day, Jason made a mistake in an important report. He looked worried. "If the manager sees this, I'm in trouble," he said. That evening, Emma stayed behind for 20 minutes. She quietly helped Jason fix every page. The next morning, Jason thanked her in front of everyone. Emma simply said, "We are a team." Then she changed the subject. She never wanted attention. She only wanted the work to be done well. The more I watched her, the more surprises I found. She always remembered birthdays. She always refilled the printer before it ran out of paper. She made fresh coffee when she saw the coffee pot was empty. If someone looked stressed, she left a small snack on their desk without saying who bought it. Many people enjoyed her kindness. Very few people noticed it came from her. One evening, we finished work together. For the first time, Emma was not in a hurry. We walked slowly toward the subway station. The sky was orange. A cool breeze moved through the trees. I looked at her and finally asked the question that had stayed in my heart. "Why don't you tell people about the things you do?" She thought for a moment, then she smiled. "My mother taught me something when I was little." "What was it?" She looked ahead as we walked. "Kindness is not a performance." I stayed quiet. She continued in a soft voice. "If people only help others because they want praise, they may stop helping when nobody is watching." I nodded. "That makes sense." She laughed a little. "I don't always get it right. I just try to do one good thing each day." Her words were simple, but they stayed with me. That night I thought about my own life. I realized I had spent too much time judging people from the outside. Emma never asked anyone to admire her. She never tried to prove that she was a good person. She simply chose kindness again and again, even when no one noticed. And somehow that quiet kindness became louder than anything I had ever heard. A few months passed. Life at the office slowly returned to normal. Our project ended successfully and everyone celebrated together. Emma came to the party for about 20 minutes. She smiled, talked with everyone, and even laughed at Jason's terrible jokes. Then she looked at the time. "I have to go," she said. Everyone understood. No one asked her to stay. One Monday morning, a new employee joined our team. His name was Kevin. He looked friendly and talked to everyone. During lunch, he sat beside me. After looking around the office for a while, He lowered his voice. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Does Emma always look so serious?" I smiled. "Yes." He hesitated. "I don't think she likes me." For a moment, I saw myself from a few months ago. I remembered every wrong conclusion I had made. I remembered the rainy night. I remembered the hospital. I remembered the quiet kindness that nobody noticed. I smiled again. "Don't worry." Kevin looked confused. "Just give her some time." "Really?" I nodded. "You'll understand." A few days later, Kevin stayed late to finish an important presentation. Everyone else had already gone home. The printer suddenly stopped working. Kevin looked stressed. "Oh no, not now." Without saying a word, Emma walked over. She opened the printer, removed the paper that was stuck inside, and checked the settings. A minute later, it worked again. "There you go," she said. Kevin smiled with relief. "Thank you. You just saved me." Emma gave her usual small smile. "I'm glad I could help." Then she picked up her bag and quietly left the office. The next morning, Kevin walked straight to my desk. "You were right," he said. "About what?" "About Emma." He laughed. "I thought she was cold." I laughed too. So did I. That afternoon I looked across the office. Emma was sitting at her desk as usual. She was focused on her work. She was quiet. She was not trying to impress anyone. But this time I noticed something different. Several people smiled when they walked past her. The cleaning lady waved at her. Jason thanked her for her help. Our manager gave her an approving nod. Emma smiled back, then returned to her work. She had not changed at all. The only person who had truly changed was me. Since then, whenever I meet someone who seems distant or unfriendly, I stop myself before making a judgment. I remind myself that every person has a story. Some stories are filled with joy. Some are filled with pain. Many are invisible. You cannot understand someone's life by watching them for a few minutes. Sometimes one small act of kindness is enough to open your eyes. It does not change the other person. It changes your heart. And that may be the biggest change of all.